Hello, everybody. It's okay. So I'm very, very pleased to welcome Sara Wajid and Jeannette Plummer, who are going to be talking about governance. Unfortunately, Esker is unable to be with us today. The arc of the conversation is that we'll be inviting a provocation, a conversation with you today. And our lovely panel are going to open it up with a short conversation to start us thinking about what it is to have what inclusive governance is. And then it'll be roughly around 10 minutes each we'll be talking. And then we'd like to open it up for dialogue, things that you might be thinking about within your institutions or things you're noticing sectorially. And we really want to have an exchange. So without ado, I'd really like to invite you to start, if I may. Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. My name is Jeannette Plummer. I am a board member of the Council for British Archaeology. It is a national institution, a charity, that has the aim of welcoming people into archaeology. And we're in our 80th year, and historically, archaeology has not been the most welcoming of fields, of disciplines. And I say this as being one of the very few global majority archaeologists that I have met throughout my career. So I have come up against many, many issues within archaeology, but specifically with regards to the conversations that I've had with other archaeologists, right? So the mindsets that are so pervasive within archaeology. My journey into governance has been fairly short. I'm only in my second year on the board, but it has been an experience so far. And I'm very happy to have the opportunity to share that with you because it has already given me a lot of insight into both governance structures, but also the barriers that prevent others from being in these spaces. So my first contact with the Council for British Archaeology, CBA for short, I'll be calling it the CBA from now on, was through a steering group that they set up in order to make sure that their awards, which is one of the sections of the activities that they run awards, the Archaeological Achievement Awards, we're sort of more aware of biases that they may have with regards to nominations and how to assess projects from maybe global majority groups that might not have the access, the means to write a sort of incredible application, right? If you've got a small community that puts on an amazing project, but then they're not able to sort of follow the rules of a good application, they might not be able to communicate sort of the value that they were able to provide for their community. So I was on a steering group that made sure that the nominations and the structure for these awards were aware of some of these issues. So that was my first contact with them. So I was starting to see where their values lied, right? I still didn't know very much about it, but I thought this was a very important work. And the executive team, I think, is also fairly short. The reason I'm saying this is because at first, I wasn't all that keen on joining the governance board. This is where I'm getting at. My journey into it required a lot of building of trust. I didn't want to be the only global majority person on a board where I would be disrespected, whether actively or passively. And I have a lot of energy. I like to do things. I like to meet people. I like to make spaces better for others. But I didn't want to put myself in a position where I would be a martyr either, right? That didn't make sense to me. So it took a lot of time. The executive board actively spoke to me, sought me out, and they said, hey, we would really like you to join our board. And the first year that they had vacancies in their board, I turned them down. I didn't know enough about them. I didn't just want to be good for the optics, but then suffer through the next 3 years. So it took some time, but the executive board was, I don't want to say relentless because that sounds pushy, but they wanted to know why. They wanted to know why I didn't want to be in that space. And that actually made me say, okay, maybe these people are worth having a conversation with and seeing how we can work together to make sure that that is a space where I could be welcomed, valued, and empowered. So through many conversations, I made it clear that I didn't want to be that only person in the room. I wanted support as well. But some of these boards, particularly within archaeology, a lot of the board members are retired, right? So we're already talking about different stages of life, different needs. Retired folks, they're able to have meetings whenever they want. When you're working, when you might have a slightly precarious role, you might not have the ability to say, yes, okay, I can commit to 6 meetings a year and whatever other else needs to happen. So the executive team actually took a lot of these things on board, and they made it clear that as a trustee member, I would also get professional development. So I'm an archaeologist. That is what I've been doing since 2009. It's what I love. That doesn't inspire that to me. That didn't seem like I was in a position to join a board. But then I started thinking about my skills in a different way. I had already stepped into positions of leadership. I had founded with 8 other archaeologists of global majority backgrounds, the European Society of Black and Allied Archaeologists. So I was already in these spaces, and I thought, why not? Why not? The CBA, their part of their mission is to widen participation. And they're very aware that with the board that they have at the moment, they don't know, they don't understand some of these barriers, and they're willing to listen and they're willing to act. So I thought, okay. And it's been a year, second year now, and I hear what other colleagues, whether it's in archaeology, museums, and so on, some of their experiences are within boards. And I have to say that I think my experience is quite different. I do feel very supported, both as an individual and as a professional. I had lots of skills that are very useful on a board, but there were others that I didn't have. I'd never done anything with regards to fundraising, and now I'm getting training in it. So one of the things that I believe the CBA is doing really well is identifying individuals with the right skills, with the right sort of energy for advocacy and to get things done, but also nurturing them, empowering them. And I do feel quite fortunate in this respect. I know that that is not the case for every board. Everyone who's been on boards will have different experiences, but I can say that institutions that may be considering their boards, why there's a reluctance from global majority, and I'll just focus on global majority. We can talk about multiple intersections that may face barriers as well, but through my experience, that was my bigger holdup. There were women on the board. There weren't people below 40 on the board either, so that was another consideration. A lot of differences that could seem quite overwhelming when you're on a board of 12 people. But I do believe that the CBA's active sort of engagement of people and identifying those who they want to work with and ensuring that they're nurtured and that they feel safe, right? For me, it had to be a situation in which I trusted the CBA and the people who I was going to be working with. And I would say that as well to anyone from global majority groups that are interested in joining governance is just because, and I'll speak from this experience, not every board is going to be the right board, right? Not every board is going to value you, and that's just the way it is, unfortunately. But if you're interested in that sphere, make sure that it's safe, that it's a place where you'll be listened to, because I do feel that with the CBA. And one of the things that I would like to see moving forward, as they're really transforming their governance. They've also identified that we have an aging membership, and they're attempting to understand why younger folks aren't involved in archaeology. So they've set up a youth governance board, which I think is also quite special. So they've also got 12 members between the ages of 18 and 25 that are not just there as, for information to be mined from them, but they're taking care of their professional development. There's an understanding amongst a lot of young people as well that archaeology may not have, or the archaeology of the near future may not have great career prospects at the moment. And they're trying very hard to ensure that once they've gone through this board, that they're professionals, right? Confident professionals that can go on to do great things. And I think that's what's something that's been very important with my experience. And what I would also really like to see is for us as a board to change the definition of archaeology, to expand its definition to include more people, for archaeology to be perceived as a joyful activity that families of any background can partake in and build meaning around, for archaeology in itself to not dictate what is or isn't archaeology and who can or can't. I have been very fortunate that I never felt the archaeology could never be something for me. But I hear it from a lot of people who do not feel that archaeology and museums are safe spaces. So I'm very excited that in the future, as we're changing up, we're disrupting a few things with the CBA, and that we could also be leaders in this sort of method that involves more people, empowers them, and changes the definition of archaeology.
Hello, lovely to see many familiar folk here in this room. My name is Sara Wajid. I'm the co-CEO of Birmingham Museums Trust. This get up is interesting, isn't it? It's a bit alienating, but I feel like you can hear me and I am speaking to you. Good. I'm going to keep this in my ear anyway. It's a bit weird, but there you go. What I want to say is a little different. I absolutely applaud Jeanette's kind of contributions as a trustee, and I have been a trustee and worked to trustee boards on and off for 20 years. And I'm starting to feel it's not that important, and I'll tell you why. Basically, sometimes board members nod off. They're just asleep, literally. I bet you've all been in meetings sometimes where there's been a board member and you want to give them the poke because they're actually like, sometimes board members have not read the minutes. Sometimes board members are really inexperienced and they don't know what they're doing. And sometimes they're really good people, but they just like got a lot of else stuff going on. And this is like the amount of time that they can give to this thing is finite. And we kind of, I think when I was younger, I expected a huge amount of boards. And in my imagination, they were like the government of an organization. And just similarly, as I've got older and I realize how incompetent and sometimes powerless governments are, or rather how poorly they wield their power, I'm starting to realize that the basic hygiene factor of the diversity of the lived experience on a board is just that. It's a basic hygiene factor, but it's not necessarily going to deliver the change that I want to see in terms of seeing diversity of lived experience on boards, because there's a lot of other things that are required to be in place to bring that change. And boards and the makeup of them are only one element of that. In Birmingham museums, we're actually starting to put our attention onto citizens' juries and creating a citizen jury to help inform our 5-year business plan and our policies and how we work and shape things at the museum. And this is partly not because of a lack of faith in our board. We've got a pretty good board, right? Obviously, I'm going to say that. I'm on the record, all the rest of it. But I'll just paint you a brief pencil portrait here. 2 senior co-CEOs, myself and Zach. Zach is black, I'm Asian. He's working class, I'm queer. We have sort of some diversity of lived experience on the top table, right? So then our board, they're a mix of working class, middle class, left wing. We've got a Tory councillor on the board, Jess Phillips MP on the board, fair amount of women, 4 people of colour. The audience, in terms of the population of Birmingham, it's about 50% non-white people, right? If you don't know Birmingham, and very young. Like the population, the citizenry of Birmingham is young, much younger than the national average. So that's who we're serving, and that's who we are as an organisation, employ about 150 people. The board are really important to hold us to account as executive. But the truth is, we as executive have an enormous amount of power. And the board have only so much they can do to change the direction of the organization from what we wanted to. As it happens, they appointed us and they're pretty happy with our vision and they back it. So that's pretty handy. But it's their job to hold us to account, hold the organization to account, and actually to hold us to account for our own vision. So if we say we want to build an anti-racist organization as CEOs, it's for them to say, well, it's been 3 years, clock's ticking, how anti-racist are you now? You came in saying you're going to do this, have you delivered? So that's the spirit in which they can hold us to account. Now, it really matters to me as an Asian woman that when I look around the board, I see non-white people, I see women. I'm not walking into a board of all middle-class, white, Oxbridge educated people. But the truth is that the system of governance and the structure of governance that most of our organizations have is that it has to be people who can afford the time, can invest in it, have got something to do, have got experience, and frankly, have enough power and status to get on the board in the first place, and enough social and intellectual capital to know that they want to be on that board and what they might do when they get on that board. Invariably, when I see younger people or people of color who are young or new in post as trustees, a huge amount is expected of them. They're often incredibly talented, as Jeannette is, and as she said, has energy, wants to get stuff done, wants to make change. But the executive and the other board members, they're kind of generally looking to a lot from that person to bring the change, be the change. And how much can one person do in an organization like mine that's existed since 1885, has 150 staff, has a city council that is bankrupt, all the rest of it? How much can you expect from that one or two change makers on the board? So it matters, as I said, hugely in the sense that if I looked around the table and didn't see those people, I would feel disempowered when I go into those meetings. But equally, I've worked to other boards. I've worked to a board of incredibly formidable Asian women, where the board was almost entirely only Asian women. Terrifying, incredibly autocratic board, very hierarchical, probably one of the scariest boards I've ever had, and not probably where I did my best work. I've been on boards. I was on the board of the Pitt Rivers, which is part of the University of Oxford. I did my best, made a contribution, wasn't certainly the only woman or, global majority person on that board. But again, where does the power really sit? At Oxford University, it sits with the trustees of Oxford University. How much power does the board of visitors on a museum that answers to the Oxford University have? Not so much. I mean, important hygiene factors, like I say, but we have to take this as a kind of basic, just a basic hygiene factor that we need lived experience on a board, and that diversity has to cut across all of the things that we expect: class, race, gender, sexuality, disability. But I think I have put a lot of store in my career and in my time with the Museum Detox, the network for people of colour working in heritage and museums, and encouraging people of colour to get on boards, to be on boards, to encourage people of colour and women to get onto more boards, be more powerful. And I think while we do have to do all of that stuff, the reason why I'm starting to put my focus on citizens' juries is because I think there is a limit, a fundamental limit to how much change our current systems of governance can actually bring to organizations that need to leap forward light years, not just like 10, 20 years. They need to leap forward a century in many cases. And so board governance matters, and not letting any organizations off the hook, but other things matter too. And there are other forms of power and change. And let's just be real about how boards actually work and how power actually functions in organizations. That is slightly cheeky and provocative to get you chatting a bit for the next 10 minutes, but I also do believe it.
Well, I don't want to be chairing anymore because that was just so rich. Thank you so much to you both. What I absolutely loved is that the multiplicity of perspective you've brought to this conversation is starting to help us unearth, well, what do models look like? Because I loved what you both had to say, that actually being on a specific board might not be the right board. Systems of power might not operate in institutions in that way. So what are the possibilities? I would love to open it up for conversations. So I'm just doing a quick sweep around the room to see, does anybody have anything that went, wow, light bulb moment, question, thought, comment? Let's have a conversation. Please do wait for the mic to come to you as well. Welcome.
Hello, I'm Dr. Ashley Fisher from York Archaeology. I was really interested about your point, Jeannette, about how some people just don't have that capacity. And I was wondering how that can be turned into, well, it is a barrier, especially to disabled people, because they face a lot of barriers just within society in general. And do you think there are any ways that those could really be tackled from the board level?
I absolutely do, and I think that the board has a responsibility, because those are barriers that are excluding talented people from their board. And really, if they want the most talented, energetic, committed people, they should be open to that discussion and understand this is a barrier. What can we do about it? Right. And I think that also allows you to identify what board you may wish to work with, because ultimately that board should be a partnership. Everyone should be working together. And if they are unwilling to even consider that as an issue, then what's the future there? What's the future? And that's what I reference to. You don't need to be a martyr for a particular organization just because they have a vacancy, or you've already worked for them in different capacities, or they're local. I'm very much a believer in putting your energy into the right places as well, because that will help you propel yourself to other arenas. You don't want to end up working in a space that burns you out, and then you're reluctant to even consider that kind of powerful position in the future, right? You want it to be empowering you. And I truly believe that if you were to discuss that with, the executive or the other board members, and they were unwilling to even consider what they are doing that excludes others, I would move on. I would take my energy and my talent elsewhere.
Did you want to add to that, I wondered? Thank you.
Hi. Not sure. Oh, there
It's
we go.
working.
Hi, thanks so much. Really great to hear from you both. I was just wanted to sort of ask a question specifically about young people on boards. I'm speaking myself about how to get more young people into boards at an event in Manchester this week. And part of the conversation that I seem to constantly be having is how do we incentivize young people to get on boards. And I myself am such a massive advocate for what great leadership experience it is, how much you really do benefit from learning for so many people on boards. But I'm also very conscious that the young, and for a lot of people, it can be a real hit and miss experience in terms of if you find the right board, or that's great. And if you find the wrong board, then it can be a really damaging experience as well. So I guess my question is, how do we keep having these conversations, but how we also direct young people and perhaps people from other kind of underrepresented backgrounds into spaces where we can talk about what we expect from a good board and what we shouldn't be tolerating from a bad board, and how we can kind of encourage one another. Because I think the biggest, difficulty is feeling discouraged when you yourself are on a board and you're facing challenges and you kind of feel like there's nobody to go to talk to about that, about kind of asking, is this normal? Should I accept this? And asking those kind of questions.
You're closer to being a young person on a board than I am. Maybe you best place to start on this.
Well, the two ideas that I have about this are, one is mentorship. That's something that on the CBA board we're doing a lot of as well. All the board members, we've just gone through mentorship training in order to provide mentorship to that youth advisory board, so to create those connections. But I think when you're trying to incentivize any group into your organization, I think the first thing is to understand those barriers and what the offer is. It's not enough to say, this is going to be good for your CV. It's what are the pain points of any particular group that you don't have represented on your board, and what can you do as an organization to target that? If if it's particular career advice, can you offer mentorship that goes beyond the length of the post? It has to do, so we can offer suggestions, but you have to target it to the community that you want to work with, because something that works in Manchester might not work in Birmingham or York. And it's about understanding that community and those barriers and working hard. It's about having multiple touch points as well with the community to build the trust that what you say you're going to offer, you will deliver. And trust takes time to build. I hope that helps.
I'm going to add something which is not an answer to your question. This is shameless, but it is a bit of a riff, and it kind of touches to your area of interest, which is that there are loads of young people working in my museum. How much power do they have? If I'm busy getting young people on the board of my museum, and then they look into the museum and go, well, what about all of these 25-year-olds over here who know loads and who have volunteered for years and who don't get any right to say anything about any decisions that are being made? What's the point of me having like a 25-year-old on the board? It's a bit of a nonsense, and it could be performative, particularly if it's exhausting for that 25-year-old, particularly if the 60-year-olds are patronizing them and then feeling all warm and fuzzy because there's a 25-year-old on the board and it's like, look at me, I'm hanging with 25-year-olds. So I'm interested in something called consent-based decision-making, which is a form of decision-making that we're embedding at Birmingham museums. We're 2 years in. It's called, if you want to look it up on the internet, sociocracy, SOCIO-cracy. And this is about developing working circles of people, otherwise known as teams, but not teams in the traditional conservation, learning, security sense, who basically are trained in consent-based decision-making. And we devolve decisions to them that would often sit with senior leadership teams and ask them to discuss these things and chair their own consent-based decision working circles. And lots of young people who wouldn't normally get into decision making are getting scaffolded into decision making behaviors and leadership through this model. So I would quite like to see our board adopt it. They haven't yet. They're a more traditionally sort of constructed and organized board and have a more traditional culture, but it's kind of infecting all areas of the organization. And it's only a matter of time till our board starts operating in that way, I think. And in terms of young people in decision making, I was sort of not young, but I was 30 when I first joined my first board, and I was part of a diversity scheme. There was like a speed dating thing in what was City Hall, the mayor's office, and lots of basically black and brown people sat around lots of white arts organizations chairs and had this weird speed dating thing. And I ended up on the board of a big charity and was really out of my depth and really like in a very, very steep learning curve when I did join the board, and bewildered for years as to what I was supposed to be doing there and how I was supposed to be operating. And I suppose the main thing I got out of it was that I got this thing on my CV and got the realization that a lot of boards are really ineffective and borderline toxic. So at least I kind of got that cold shower and reality check. So I think it's really important to give people young people a lot, and also not to expect that the organization is going to suddenly become like young person centered because you've got a young person on the board.
Thank you. And just to add that really speaks to our last conversation in this Theatre One was with the youth panel, who were talking about this very subject and completely echoing what you were saying about shared decision making, about buddying, about creating the right culture for those folks to come on the board. So really, really great. They have the stall next door, so I do recommend visiting them as well. Thank you. We have a question here.
Yeah, I'm Lucimara Letelier, I'm from Brazil, and I have been taking part of different boards in charities, museums, arts organizations for more than 15 years. So I resonate a lot and I hear what you say. And one of the things I have been thinking when you said that sometimes we get full respect, sometimes we get no respect at all. But one thing that I want to hear from you, what is the benefit and the impact that being in a board reflects on the other works that we do? Because as a change maker, as someone who wants to change archaeology, I want to reimagine museums. So I am on the board of Icon Brazil, of Icon Sustain, and I'm the vice chair of the Icon Sustainability Committee. And what I think I want to hear from you is we do classes, we do lectures, we do independent movements as the Museum Detox. And sometimes this oxygen doesn't get into these boards. Sometimes we are on a board to get large scale of what we're doing or to see public policies being implemented on behalf of what we believe. But do you see the flow of energy and resources from being on a board, driving to the other initiatives, independently, private or public, that we all do and we are all involved, and in both ways, from the organizations you are part of the board and from these organizations to the board? Do you see this happening? I just want to hear your experience.
Okay, I'll start quick. I'll give you an example of the Museum and Heritage Awards. I'm a judge. I'm not on the board. I don't know if there is a board, but I'm on the judge of these awards, right? Started 3 years ago. Was the only non-white judge when I started. And 3 years on, Museum Detox has a stall here today. We're doing this panel, which is actually a Museum Detox panel, I believe. Museum Detox panel. So we are using this platform, taking this space. I think about 15 or 16 Museum Detox people have come today to volunteer on the stall, and we will use this platform to project and talk and take donations as well for Museum Detox on the stall if anybody would like to make them. So I guess that is a small example of an intervention, which is not exactly, being a judge is not the same as a trustee, but it's something. At the same time, I'm thinking, what difference am I really able to make to, for instance, the makeup of people who are actually going to end up with awards? Given the structure of the awards, that's something I really have to think about. And, I think we just have to keep our eyes open and be real and have honest conversations about that with our executives, with our boards, and be transparent. But I think that there is that cross-fertilization, what people call it bridging capital, is it? Between, as you say, between your activist cell and your kind of more establishment organization that you move between. And I think that is an absolutely excellent reason for doing that. It's just that people have to be really good operators in both spaces. You have to be really effective at, cross-fertilizing that power. And as the great Stuart Hall once said, when you are in a big institution, you have to constantly be asking yourself, are they in your mouth or are you in theirs? And that's the sort of trick, I guess, with any kind of question of power and change.
Thank you.
So I completely agree. And one of the examples that I have is also about the awards of the CBA, because I'm actually I'm the chair of the panel. And I have been directing conversations as well within our panels. When we have those awards come through for global majority folks, I have, so the kind of impact through awards may not be scalable, right? Because you're sort of maybe, awarding one person, one group at a time. But that's also changing the perspective within archaeology of who gets awarded, who gets celebrated, right? It's not just the big blockbuster archaeology project from the well-established institutions. But with regards to your question as well as to how do you make sure that, there's cohesion and a coherent sort of thread between the board and the public, or the board and the organization. The thing that I've also observed is that it can be very easy for a board to have the policy, to have the discussions, to do the training, and have it stop there. Right? I think it's very easy if you don't want it to go beyond there. It's very easy to just say, "Well, I've ticked all these things, and that's where it stops." It's not really in their interest to do the work required to change for a transformation of an organization. And so I think being maybe a little bit aware of some of those situations also ties in with where to put energy. And I absolutely am amazed about all the boards that you're on and everything that you're doing. But sometimes I think an organization shows sort of its true values in the way that they almost halt their own progress or their own transformation. And it can be very difficult to encourage those. And that's why changing a board and a lot of these decisions are for a future. They're almost not for us to enjoy right now, right? They're for future generations to sort of reap the benefits of the tiny little chess moves that we do now. And I find that kind of encouraging as well, because it gives meaning to what I'm doing. Again, without being a martyr, I think it can be very important to say, well, I may not have access or the opportunities for certain things, but the people who come behind me will, right? And I find that very encouraging.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we are almost at the end of this session. So I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for opening up a really, really extraordinarily interesting subject. And the way of thinking I'm taking away from this, does power and governance, does it operate from within, from our boards, from our exec, or from what is emergent with yourselves, Sara, and what you've opened up about, or does it open up with our citizens jury? How does that happen? How do we navigate that with our boards and with our exec? And I can't wait to hear more, but thank you for opening up this really rich conversation. I want to imagine a year from now, and we're all in this room, and if I may ask you to fast forward, what do we want to see happen? What does this change look like? What does the power dynamic look like? Can I open that with you, Sara?
So tough, Jenny. I'm tired.
No,
Just talk for 35 hours. You're asking me to do my best thinking now. Right, what do we want to see a year from now? I suppose a year from now, our citizens' jury would have deliberated in Birmingham. 25 people would have come together. And I want to see decisions made that are fundamentally more rooted and mandated by the full spectrum of the people of Birmingham in a way that shocks me, because I sort of think I know what I want to see, but the things I want to see things happening that are not what I would have expected, or that are kind of come from my monopoly of power as a CEO. And some of those things will no doubt make me unhappy because they won't fit with my tidy plan. So I suppose a year from now, I want to be in a state of shock.
Oh, I like that. The gauntlet is set.
By next year, I would like for us to have torn down so many more barriers to access within archaeology that families that never even considered archaeology as something that they could partake in, to be something that helps them build memories and placemaking, and have it be something that's meaningful to them, although they may not choose to follow a path in archaeology, but they can engage with it. They can perceive archaeology and museums as a very joyful experience. That would make me very, very happy.
And what a place to close with a joyful experience. Thank you, Jeannette, Plummer, Sara Wajid.